the Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. strip, which was psychedelic. He was taking influences from things like the San Francisco underground poster artists, from op artists and surrealists, things that had never been seen before in ordinary standard superhero comics. There was also, I think, Harvey Comics, home of Casper the Friendly Ghost. They published an issue of Will Eisner's The Spirit in 1967. It was, I think they published a couple of issues of it, and it was reprinting older Eisner Spirit stories. And I read that, and it was like a huge light bulb suddenly going on in my head. I suddenly realised that actually this was what I loved about comics. It was the way that you could tell a story just using comics. And Eisner, he was genuinely a master. Sometimes his actual stories, by today's standards, might be seen as a bit schmaltzy, something like that. But the way he told them cannot be faulted. He would do things with the page layouts. He would tell wonderful, eccentric little stories. Adolf Hitler suddenly deciding to come to America to see why everybody hates him, and wandering around in a Jewish neighbourhood in the Bronx. A little 4 or 5 page story. There was another story about Gerhard Schnabel. He had some great names for his characters, Eisner. This was a guy who, since he was a child, had been aware that he could fly. But his parents had discouraged him from this because they didn't want him to stand out from the rest of the crowd. And the story is almost not about him. He's decided that, yes, today, damn it all, I'm going to show the world that I can fly. So he's going to go up to the top of this tall building and launch himself into space. But there's some nonsense with the Spirit and a bunch of gangsters going on in the background simultaneously. So when he launches himself into space, he flies, he swoops, but everybody's looking at the gunfight that is going on between the Spirit and the gangsters. Until a stray bullet actually hits Gerhard Schnabel, and he plummets down to the gutters below, and nobody ever knew that he could fly. You know, it's not the best story in the world, but it was certainly a lot more inventive and witty and genuinely entertaining than a lot of the superhero stories that I've been reading. I realised that Eisner was telling stories on a different level. I also found people like Harvey Kurtzman, who was writing some incredible stuff for E.C. Comics. He was the genius behind the original Mad Comics. And again, his storytelling in Mad and in his war books that he did, they were the most anti-war war books that you can possibly imagine. They weren't about how great it is being a tough GI. They were about how terrible it is to die for absolutely no reason at all in a foreign land. That they were wonderful. So I was starting to absorb these various influences. And I was still, and this is important, I was still going to the library, and I was still reading my way through books that I couldn't afford. And this is important, even if you are the biggest comic fan in the world, even if you are absolutely obsessed with comics, for God's sake, don't read just comics. You know, read books. Read all sorts of things, because you need that perspective. There are things that you will not find in comics that you will only find in books, and vice versa. But the important thing is to be diverse.